the love of God, the craziness of the world. Join me weekly on the Discussions with Delinah podcast to talk about it. Let's get deep and vulnerable with many topics that will leave you thinking. Topics from joy to anxiety. Let's talk about the Word and how God loves us all and wants us to grow. I'll catch you next week on DWD. Hey, y'all. It is Delinah back with another Discussions with Delinah. I don't know why the filter, not the filter because I don't have a filter on. The camera, lens is kind of washing me out a little bit and making my hair extremely bright. I mean, granted, it is pretty bright, but this is what happens when you're out in the sun, ladies and gentlemen. Florida sun is no joke. Anyways, welcome back. Ignore the balloons that are in my background. They were from Valentine's Day. This one is also kind of in my vase. Yeah, they were from Valentine's Day. But I did not get to do a Discussions with Delinah last week. Just so much has been going on emotionally and mentally, and for those of you who follow me on Instagram, you know that my childhood dog just recently passed away, so pretty much majority of the week my head was in and out of that. But we're back, and we're going to try to continually post, but at the very least I want to at least make sure I do every other week. But anyway, this week's topic is waiting. Everybody's favorite thing to do. We're not patient people. Most of us are like children at Christmas, where we eagerly wait and we're looking forward to opening the presents, and sometimes we get a little too excited and we open the presents anyway before Christmas. My younger brother, when he was little, and I wonder if he remembers this, but he used to literally open the Christmas gifts, and to avoid us finding out, he would grab tape and he would tape over it, so you can tell that he had looked at the presents, because it's a whole kind of not straight. He was little. He was 3 years old, 4 years old, so the tape is on there, but it's not the way that it was taped the first time. Especially because the people that, the adults in my family can actually, wrap gifts fairly well. So you see, it looks like a child wrapped it. And I think he got caught because we noticed, 4 or 5 of them had, extra tape on it. And we were like, what the heck? So, yeah, we're not very patient. And every hour seems like an eternity. And then when the time arrives, we can't move fast enough to get to the Christmas tree and tear open all those gifts. But try as we might, we cannot make time go any faster. And waiting is just a part of life. And no matter how fast-paced and hectic our daily schedules are, we still run up against times and places where we have no choice but to stop, sit, or just stand in line. I don't know about y'all. When I go to theme parks, one of the things I hate the most is standing in line. I love roller coasters so much, but I hate waiting in line for roller coasters. And I don't even mind waiting for my family to get on a roller coaster, and then as long as I'm sitting. If I'm standing, then I hate it just as much. But waiting is just not something that we really like to do. I mean, some people may love waiting. I haven't met one of those people, but I mean, I'm sure they're out there. But the Bible often connects waiting with faith. And sometimes scripture even uses those two words interchangeably. So while we may not like it, waiting serves an important role in our Christian life and in our faith, and the work that God does within us is just as important while we wait as when we get whatever we have been waiting for. And so, of course, none of us finds waiting easy, like I said, but in fact, that also might bring pain and will almost certainly try us and test us in our waiting season. Waiting demands patience and exacts a price. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm not the most patient person. Even though everyone continues to tell me otherwise, I don't feel like I'm very patient. Sometimes that waiting season is so much more than we can realize and so much more than we know. And it's the toll on the road that each of us must pay. God promised Abraham a blessing. He says, I will give you many descendants. There's some words in between there, but he talks about that in Hebrews 6:14. But in order to receive his blessing, Abraham had to wait day after day, year after year. And in that time, God did fulfill his promise, and Abraham's waiting turned out to have been his greatest blessing. And he was to become the father of the, Jewish nation. So Hebrews 6:13 says, "For when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself, saying, 'Surely I will bless you and multiply you.' And thus Abraham, having waited patiently, obtained the promise." So we also hear the promises of God and long for God to fulfill them. And yet we often have to wait for those promises. Like, just because, we hear a promise from God doesn't mean that it's going to happen that same day. Like, we can hear that God said, "Oh, I'm going to bring an amazing job into your life." It could be tomorrow. It could be 15 years from now. But know that God is going to fulfill that promise. And if Abraham's story teaches us anything, is that God proves himself faithful again and again and again. And, as human, we want something to do, some action to take, but sometimes our part is simply just to wait. To wait with a confident, disciplined, and patient assurance that God will keep those promises and he will come through. And even though those times aren't easy, in the end, we can honestly reflect that it was worth the wait. And indeed, waiting can result in our greatest blessing. I feel like, am in a bit of a waiting season myself. There is just so much, happening, and so many amazing blessings that I know God has in store for me. In I think it's 53 days. I think it's 53 or 54. Can't remember. But in less than 2 months, I will be getting married. In less than 3 months, a couple weeks after getting married, I will be graduating. I will then be moving out. But after that, I'm moving to another place in July. And so there's just kind of, a lot going on. And then throughout all of that, for the next year, I have to plan for a wedding. And it's just a lot. And it's all amazing things. And it's all things that I know are coming from God. I also have to find a job because after I graduate, so far I don't have a solidified job. So I have to do that. And again, it's very stressful, all of those things, but they're amazing things. But because of that, I do feel like I'm in a bit of a waiting season. It's February, so everything's coming up really fast, but it's also taking so long. And, for me personally, I just want to be married already. I just want to graduate already. But I also don't want to focus on what life looks like after graduation. And so it's definitely a very interesting time for myself. But I know that God is using this time to make me stronger and to make me patient and preparing me to be an amazing wife, preparing me to be a college graduate. There was a story of a man pacing back and forth, and when his friend asked him what was wrong, Brooks, who's the man, replied, "The trouble is I'm in a hurry, but God isn't." So I would say that story to say, and that's something that I read in one of my devotionals, can you relate? And sometimes the hardest part of following God is waiting on him to move. And we begin to question, why won't our house sell? When will I hear something from the person who interviewed me? How long do I have to wait for my child's or friends or parents or bosses' attitude to change? How long do I have to, wait to have kids? How long do I have to, and the list goes on and on and on. And it's so funny because this is something that has been talked about a lot recently at the church that I go to, where, God's timing is nowhere like our timing. For us, it may seem like, oh my gosh, God, is not in a hurry. And it's not that he's not in a hurry, it's that he already knows when it's going to happen. It's not like he's thinking, should I give it to her tomorrow? Should I give it to her 3 months from now? No, he's like, oh, this is happening at this time. We just don't know the time. So to us, it could be like, oh my gosh, God doesn't even care. He's forgotten about it. And that's not true. That's simply not true. One example that I'll give from my own personal life, which was a very stressful situation when I was in it, but I am so grateful that I am out of it, is scholarships when I was coming into FGCU. Mind you, that was 4 years ago, which is crazy to even say that, but it was 4 years ago. I was graduating high school. I had almost no money lined up for college. My parents were telling me, hey, if you can't figure out a way to pay for school, you're going to have to go to community college because we don't have it. Again, I have 5 siblings. All of us were living at the house at the time, all 6 of us. That's a lot of people to take care of. To then spend tens of thousands of dollars to go send a child to school. And I just remember being so distraught. You know, like February came around, March came around, April, May, and it was like, oh my gosh, I still have no money. I have like maybe $1,000. Whereas, if you know, tuition's kind of expensive. I think for my school, it's like 16 or 18,000 on top of, you know, like housing and stuff like that. So it was like, wow, like I don't have this. I don't have this. And it's crazy because suddenly then I graduated. I still didn't have the money to pay. June came around, still didn't have it. July came around, a few scholarships started trickling in. By the end of July, early August, right before going into school, suddenly all of these scholarships that appeared to come from nowhere suddenly were, you know, in my account, and I only had to pay, you know, I still had to pay out of pocket a little bit freshman year, but I, you know, I worried so much and I was tried so much in that time where it was like, okay, am I going to have to get 4 jobs, you know, coming into college just to pay off, you know, my school? Am I going to have to take out loans and then have to pay them off later? And I am graduating in 3 months, and I can tell you now, I am leaving as a college graduate with no student loans at all. I have not had to take out a loan in my 4 years being here. And I thank God every day because I got scholarships enough to cover my entire time here, as well as receiving refund checks. And again, in that moment of that trying time, I wouldn't have been able to foresee that. I wouldn't have been able to foresee that I was going to not have to pay out of pocket, that I was going to be able to get FAFSA and other scholarships. But 4 years later, I look back on it and I'm like, why was I so worried when I know that God's got me and I know that God was going to take care of me? And He did. He did, and then some. You know, like, it's crazy how we doubt that He wants the best for us and that He's going to do what He says. In Proverbs 3:5-6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him and He will make your path straight. Obeying and trusting God requires that measure of patience. And trust me, I have been put in my place time and time again by God that He will do everything He says. He will move mountains. You just got to trust Him. You just got to have patience, and you got to enjoy the waiting season. And don't just wait and be like, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to do anything in my waiting season. Wait purposefully. Put yourself in positions that are going to help move you towards that blessing that is promised. And just trust that He's got you. Have a blessed Sunday and have an absolutely amazing week, everyone. Till next time.